Tune in tonight. Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight.
Tonight, we'll take 10 to talk about pain, the feeling you get when you look at a picture of your 12-year-old self having a great time at your cousin's bat mitzvah. It's a deep burn. Now, Americans treat pain much like your coworker Jerry treats the box of donuts left in the break room, by totally destroying it without mercy. To do that, we crush any feelings of pain by using powerful analgesics. Now, before we move on, I want to be clear that I said analgesic, a word for a pain-relieving drug, not Anal G6, the K-pop band that is sweeping the nation, or anal e-cig, which at this point, honestly, could be a thing. You know what? We'll just call them painkillers. We'll call them painkillers and be done. Anyway, so this can only be done using the big daddy butt cigs of the painkiller family, none other than opioids. Opioids are drugs that are derived from opium, a naturally occurring substance from poppy plants that humans have harvested for centuries to create medicines, justify imperialism, and to make hanging out in dens way more interesting. Opioids include everything from heroin to legal prescription drugs like Vicodin and Oxycontin. But regardless if it comes in a syringe or a pill bottle, opioids all essentially work the same way. They stop neurotransmitters carrying pain signals from reaching the brain. So every time you take a dose of an opioid, a miniature game of Red Rover starts in your brain. On one side, you have the opioid, represented by the 1980 East Germany weightlifting team. And on the other side, you have the pain signals, represented by a 12-year-old Jewish boy from Connecticut. The pain signals try to get through, but obviously can't. I mean, how could you expect them to beat those guys? They're not even a man yet. So, the result is a general feeling of painlessness, which sounds very nice, especially to Americans. Not feeling pain is basically the chemical version of the American dream. And we are living that dream. While Americans make up only 5% of the world's population, we consume 80% of the world's prescription opioids. Yeah, that's a startling fact, especially given that Americans already consume 80% of the Earth's supply of Mountain Dew and over 95% of the world's patients. Since 1999, prescriptions in the state of Minnesota alone have increased more than 400%. Right now, the CDC estimates that for every 100 Minnesotans, there are 62 active prescriptions for opioid painkillers. That is a lot. That means every time you go into a Target, everyone there has enough prescriptions to go around for almost 2 Kid Rock concerts, or an entire weekend at Charlie Sheen's. Now, while it might seem like a good thing that people are getting effective relief from pain, there's a major downside. Opioid painkillers are incredibly prone to create chemical dependency. Opioids create dependency because they increase the levels of dopamine in a person's brain. Dopamine is the chemical in your brain that is released when you do something rewarding. It's often released during sex, running, getting a gold star, or getting a gold star during sex. This feeling is so powerful, people who find it artificially through painkillers often become addicted. At this point, it's important to remember that these pills are basically heroin. And Minnesotans are starting to feel the negative impact of taking basically heroin for extended amounts of time. Over a quarter of all drug treatment admissions in the state of Minnesota are related to heroin and opioid prescription drugs. And since 1999, more people have died from overdoses related to prescription painkillers than heroin, or any other opioid for that matter. The amount of opioid-related death has increased every year since 1999, peaking in 2014 with over 319 deaths in Minnesota alone. That's a higher number than the deaths that are attributed to both car crashes and homicides. And it's twice the number of deaths related to cocaine and meth combined. And so far, the numbers only continue to rise. And while you might assume that the people affected by the opioid crisis are just disaffected teenagers that look like extras from Train Spotting, the truth is that the average person who overdoses from opioids in Minnesota is a white male between the ages of 45 and 54. These are your parents, and grandparents. These are the people who ruffle your hair and force you to listen to stories about finding parking outside of a Perkins. These are the people who hang up clips of Marmaduke on the fridge and call you when they're having problems with the Wi-Fi. Now, how did this situation get more depressing than losing your virginity while listening to Elliott Smith's Needle in the Hay? Well, opioids like Vicodin and Percocet have been available for decades. It wasn't until the late 90s, though, when the epidemic started. And that was in part because in 1996, Purdue Pharma, a then relatively small pharmaceutical company with headquarters in Connecticut, convinced the FDA that OxyContin wasn't addictive and could be prescribed to treat chronic pain. 6 years later, Purdue Pharma's executive team of 3 suited-up lumps of mayonnaise pleaded guilty to intentionally misleading the United States government to allow OxyContin to be prescribed for chronic pain. That lawsuit costed them $600 million to be paid over 8 years, or $75 million a year. And while that seems like a lot, keep in mind that they made a net profit of $3.1 billion in 2010. That's like punishing a child by taking away just one Lego. It's totally ineffective because Timmy still has 2,925,000,000 Legos to play with. For some perspective, a heroin dealer in Minnesota will make around $100 selling a gram, but if caught with any amount of heroin for the first time, they can face up to 20 years in jail and $250,000 of fine, essentially ruining their life forever. OxyContin opened the floodgates for other pharmaceutical companies to push doctors to prescribe similar drugs to treat chronic pain, a condition that the Institute of Medicine estimates 1 in 3 American adults suffer from, meaning that we thought we could medicate ourselves enough to not feel pain entirely. Look, that's not a public health policy. That's a bad line of breakup poetry written by a high school student who goes by his middle name, okay? You're not Anton, you're Jeff, okay? Jesus. The state of Minnesota has responded recently by passing Steve's Law, a law that legalized the use of naloxone, a drug that counteracts the effects of opioids. If someone is overdosing from prescription painkillers or heroin, administering naloxone can literally save their life. And because this epidemic is so pervasive, chances are that you know someone who has been affected by opioids. If you know someone or are struggling yourself with opioid addiction, you can contact treatment centers like Hazelden Betty Ford for more information, or visit your local CVS to pick up a prescription for naloxone. Most of all, contact your state representatives and tell them that this is an issue you care about. But ultimately, the bigger problem is the fact that we think we can eliminate pain instantly. We want fast answers, fast relief, so Minnesotans can stop complaining about pain and get back to doing what they do best, complaining about sports, construction, and the weather. But unfortunately, the body doesn't work that way, and there are other options that may be way less addictive, and it's the job of doctors, medical professionals, and others to help us find them. Pain cannot be eliminated right away. It's a haunting, terrible, embarrassing, and inevitable part of our life. Kind of like photos from the most awkward period of my life. And over time, we hopefully will learn how to deal with it. Thank you. Stay nice, Minnesota. All right.
Minnesota tonight. Yeah. Tune in. Minnesota tonight. Tune in. Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight.